Hello everyone. The first couple of videos on this channel weren't in the tone I was hoping for when I was looking at starting this channel. I wanted to start a friendly and upbeat conversation, sometimes on a serious topic, yet friendly nonetheless. The kind of conversation you'd have over a cup of tea. Talking of which. But the issues that came up needed addressing. I was working on a different video, and while I think that it's an important topic that will need covering, I want to get back to the kind of videos I wanted to make instead. So if I'm going to have a positive channel about trans issues and showing you that there's nothing to worry about transgender people, I really should talk about what it is to be trans and the kind of things trans people experience as a result. The basic definition of transgender is that a person's gender identity doesn't align with the sex they were assigned at birth. I first came across the terms trans and its opposite cis when I was studying organic chemistry in Mr. Davies' class during my GCSEs. Cis meaning in line with, and trans meaning across from. You may have heard of trans fatty acids. So it is with the words transgender and cisgender. Transgender are people who don't feel the label they were given is the right fit for them, and cisgender people are those who are happy with their label. Cisgender is just a way to differentiate between the two whilst talking. It's no different to being called straight or heterosexual, for example. It doesn't change how anyone is viewed, and it certainly isn't an insult. Transgender is an umbrella term, and it's used to encompass a whole host of different kinds of people. Obviously includes those like me, who want to transition from one gender to the other, male to female, and vice versa. But there are those who don't feel the gender binary is right for them. Non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, or in some other way. There is no one way to be transgender. At the end of the day, the only person who can decide what your gender identity is you. You're also the only person who can decide if you're trans enough to use the label. And if you're wondering whether you are or not, you probably are. It is generally a good idea to seek help. To help yourself understand what's going on. It can be a very long and lonely road to walk on your own. And you may identify as one way to start with, and as your understanding grows and evolves, you may find how you identify changes. There's nothing wrong with that. It took me a long time to come to terms with my gender. I had had a lot of experiences from when I was young that hinted that everything wasn't quite as simple as it seemed. I would look at girls, the things girls wore and did, and I would feel jealous. I would have that inane desire to be in their position, to be going through what they were. But I had no idea this was different from almost every other boy my age. I just thought that everyone had these thoughts. I certainly didn't have that certainty that some trans people talk of. I never had that feeling that I knew I was a girl. I kind of wish I did. But over time I began to develop an awareness that I was different. And as I went through my teens, I had a fairly good idea what it was. I remember when one of my friends in school came out to me as gay. I remember thinking, I should come out to him as trans. I'm fairly sure I'm trans. I should come out to him as trans. But I was too scared. I couldn't do it. It was something that scared me. Every representation of trans people told me that it was wrong and deviant. Pretty much the only positive example I had growing up was Eddie Izzard, but that action transvestite persona didn't match with what I was feeling in myself. I felt that if I didn't hide it and run from it, then I'd spend the rest of my life as an outcast and alone. The fear of that kept me hiding in the closet for over a decade. This crushing and overwhelming shame hang over me no matter how hard I tried to escape. With that constant fear that someone would find out this huge secret I had always kept, expose it to the world, I would spend the rest of my life ridiculed and alone. There are some people who still treat it like it's something wrong. Some think it's a mental illness, that it can be cured with some therapy. Something that is a phase or a fad, something they'll be grown out of. It's these attitudes that hurt trans people more than any other. These feelings don't fade, they don't go away, no matter how hard you try. They only ever grow stronger until it's impossible to contain them any longer. The last couple of years I've spent out have been liberating and freeing, and I've never been happier and more at peace with myself. Trans people are happier, healthier, and more productive when they don't feel they have to hide. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Once a person has come to terms with their gender identity, what's next? Transitioning refers to the journey a person takes to align their exterior with the way they feel internally. There is no set way to transition. It's important to take the route that works for the individual involved. It's up to the individual what their destination is and how long they'll take to reach it. No one else should dictate what path you take or the time frame you do it in. You need to do what's right for you. And what works for me may not be what works for other people. There are generally two parts to transitioning, medically and socially. Either can be done first, or they can be started at the same time. Personally, I transitioned socially first. I think I'd like to have had the option to have started my medical transition first, but I didn't get to choose. One of the biggest steps of socially transitioning is coming out, but there's many parts to that. This is the process by which trans and other queer people tell the world who they really are. I found it really helpful to have a close group of friends who knew me as I truly was. This formed a support group for me who I knew I could rely on regardless of what came over the coming months. And I found that a great help. There are trans support groups all over the country that can help throughout a trans person's journey. I'm part of an amazing support group based in Plymouth, not alone, and I would recommend looking into anyone who's struggling with their gender identity. Places it probably helps to inform before someone comes out would include their workplace, their doctors. It is also probably a good idea to tell your family before coming out publicly too. They deserve at least that much respect and love. Other things to consider are whether you'll change your name. Some people's names can be fairly androgynous and could be used either way. What pronouns you'll go by. Changing your name legally in the UK isn't a difficult procedure, but notifying everyone can be fairly long-winded. I know there's a couple of places I still need to update, and there always will be something you forget. The rest of socially transitioning is up to the individual, how you tell people and come out. After that, it's a case of adjusting to the assumed gender, wearing the appropriate clothing, and using the facilities that match the new gender. Saying that, bear in mind, clothing is just clothing. It should be up to you what you want to wear, and if you're more comfortable wearing certain things than others, don't assume just because you're transitioning you have to wear dresses and skirts. Listing it out like this can make it sound very simple. It's anything but. Adjusting can be very difficult and a very intimidating process. It takes time and is full of tiny steps. There will be many firsts as a trans person who progresses. I still find firsts that come up, and although they are becoming fewer and far in between, they are still nerve-wracking and scary experiences. We all have our own journeys to make, and we make them in our own way. The other half to transitioning is medical intervention. Now, I just want to be clear, being transgender is not a medical illness, physiological or psychological. It has been removed from the American, British, World Health Organization lists of illnesses, as well as many other national and international organizations. I, nor anyone else, is mentally ill because of being transgender. There is gender dysphoria, which is when a mismatch between someone's gender and their appearance causes anything from an uncomfortable feeling to severe distress. It can be triggered by many different things. It can vary in strength, and not all transgender people have it. I do, but it's not that strong. I don't like certain things about my appearances, my shoulders, my chest, and my arms, for instance. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. They look too manly for my liking, but as my hormones are progressing, I'm noticing changes. My arms clearly have less muscle in them, and I think my shoulders are looking less broad, and this helps with those feelings. Now, not every trans person will go through a medical transition. You don't have to have medical intervention to be trans. There may be reasons why someone can't have treatment. They may feel like they don't need to, or they may not be able to physically do so, but they are still trans. Being trans isn't an illness. Medical help is a regular thing. This is because changing your body is a long, drawn-out process, and doctors are best placed to assist with this. I'd say medically transitioning generally breaks down into 3 areas: blockers, hormones, and surgery. A trans person can go through all of these, some of them, or none of them. There's no one way to be trans, and there's no right or wrong way either. Blockers can be in a couple of forms. Its main goal is to inhibit the effects of a person's native hormones. For trans women, we can take testosterone blockers to try and stop its effects. Transgender men can have anti-estrogens if they have a high level of estrogen. Similarly, younger trans people can take puberty blockers. These just hold off the effects of puberty until they are old enough to make an informed decision. If they change their mind, they can come off them and they will continue with a regular puberty, as they would have done before. Hormone replacement therapy, or cross-sex hormones, are to help a trans person develop secondary sexual characteristics of their assumed gender. This helps reduce any dysphoria they're feeling, and it helps them blend in a bit more. This can be very important for a trans person's safety. The Office of National Statistics released a study that showed trans people are twice as likely to be the victims of crime as cis people, so it is a valid concern. The effects of hormones can take a long time. The younger a person is, the more effective they'll be, but it is very rare that anyone under 18 is ever prescribed hormones in the UK. The timeframe for hormones to really start to take effect can range from 3 months to a year, and it can take years and years to see their full impact. Since trans people don't naturally produce their own hormones, they will have hormone treatment for almost their whole lives. The effects of hormones obviously vary between testosterone and estrogen. Trans men on testosterone, or T as it's sometimes shortened to, can expect muscle growth, facial hair, other bodily hair growth, a deepening of their voice, as well as more oily skin and, unfortunately, acne. Trans women can expect to lose muscle mass and strength, smoother, less oily skin, fat redistributing to the more feminine areas, the thighs and hips for instance, fuller and longer hair on the head with less and finer body hair, as well as some breast growth. There will also be an emotional impact, whether it's testosterone or estrogen. But as the body adapts to their influence, trans people's emotions will stabilise over time. I know my emotions are surfacing a lot quicker and they're harder to keep a leash on. These aren't a full list of the effects of hormones, more of a highlight reel. I can go into further detail in a future video perhaps. The last stages of medical transition generally consist of surgeries. Now again, it is not necessary for trans people to have surgery. Contrary to common perception, there is no one surgery. There's a whole host of surgeries trans people can go through. A trans woman can have a series of surgeries, commonly referred to as facial feminization surgeries, or FFS. These consist of several different procedures aimed to make the face more feminine. They could have breast augmentation to help increase their bust. They can have liposuction on their waist to help give an hourglass figure, and they can have surgery to increase the size of their hips to help this. And yes, they can have gender confirmation surgery so they can be more comfortable with their genitalia. Trans men similarly have several surgical options open to them. This includes top surgery to remove any breasts, so the transmasculine person can be more comfortable. They don't have to worry about covering up any longer or binding, and they can be free to be themselves. And that's why trans people transition. It's not to be part of a fad or any of these other rubbish things that get thrown around. It's so they can be more comfortable in their own bodies, and they can be free to be themselves. That was a very quick look at what it means to be trans and to transition. The last thing I wanted to quickly cover in this video is what you should do if you encounter a trans person, even if it's in a single-sex space. Put simply, treat them the same as you would treat anyone else. They're another human being themselves. They aren't any more of a threat than anyone else you'd likely encounter. If anything, they're less of a threat. If they're in a single-sex space, they probably are at least nervous, if not terrified, and they'll want to be in and out as quickly as possible. If you can put them at ease, great. But don't take it personally if they don't respond. The last thing you should do is confront them or invade their privacy or question their presence. My mother always taught me, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So, that was a very brief overview. If there's anything else you'd like to know or feel I should have covered, please feel free to put it in the comments below. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them, or anything else you'd like to say. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you feel I've earned a like or a subscription, I'd really appreciate it. Please feel free to share this with your friends. And I hope to see you all again soon. Goodbye.